Welcome occultists to a new video. These stories may be triggering or graphic due to the subject matter. If you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Let's begin. I've always believed that small towns hide the biggest secrets, and our little town of Elmdale was no exception. There was one secret, in particular, that beckoned to us like a siren's call: the abandoned sewers. Legends surrounded them, whispers of a time when the town thrived on the now-defunct industries that these tunnels once served. It was on a dare that we, three friends bound by our love for the unknown, decided to explore the labyrinthine sewers. It was me, Alex, the cautious one, Jake, the thrill-seeker, and Emily, the brains of our trio. We geared up one fateful evening, our backpacks stuffed with flashlights, extra batteries, and a camera to document our adventure. The entrance was through an open drainage pipe on the outskirts of town, a gaping maw that led into darkness. As we entered, the smell hit us first, a musty, damp odor that spoke of forgotten spaces and time-worn stone. Our flashlights pierced the gloom, revealing graffiti-covered walls and remnants of a bygone era. Water trickled somewhere in the distance, its sound magnified in the echoing tunnels. We followed the main sewer line, our voices hushed, a mix of excitement and apprehension in the air. It was Emily who first noticed something odd. "Guys, do you hear that?" she whispered. We stopped, listening. At first, there was nothing but the sound of dripping water. But then, a faint whisper reached our ears, a murmur that seemed to come from the very walls around us. Unnerved but curious, we pressed on, the whispers growing louder, more distinct. They were voices, a cacophony of hushed tones that seemed to speak in a language we couldn't understand. "That's not possible," I murmured, a chill running down my spine. "We're the only ones down here." Jake, ever the skeptic, suggested it was just the echo of water or perhaps other explorers. But the further we went, the clearer it became that these were not human voices, nor were the echoes of the living. The air grew colder, the darkness seemed to press in on us. Our flashlights flickered, casting dancing shadows that made it seem as though the walls themselves were alive. Then, without warning, the voices stopped. The silence that followed was oppressive, a heavy blanket that smothered us. We stood there, frozen, when suddenly the ground beneath us shifted. A rumble, low and menacing, vibrated through the floor. The walls trembled, dust and small stones raining down on us. "Earthquake!" Jake yelled, and we turned to run, but the way we had come was no longer there. Instead, there was a wall, solid and unyielding. Panic set in. We were lost, trapped in a maze of tunnels with no idea which way led to safety. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Our flashlights dimmed, their dying light barely enough to see by. We wandered, the sense of direction lost in the twisting, turning passageways. Time became a blur, measured only by the weakening beams of our flashlights and the growing fatigue in our limbs. It was Emily who collapsed first, her breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. We huddled around her, trying to offer comfort, but our own fear was a tangible thing, a monster that fed on our despair. I don't know how long we sat there, in the dark, waiting for the end. But then, something changed. A sound, different from the whispers and the rumble of the earth. It was a melody, haunting and beautiful, echoing through the tunnels. Drawn by the music, we found the strength to stand, to follow its source. It led us through the darkness, a guiding beacon in our despair. We emerged into a chamber, vast and cavernous. The music was louder here, filling the space with its ethereal tune. In the center of the chamber, there was a light, soft and glowing, emanating from a figure that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. It was a woman, or what resembled a woman, her form shimmering, translucent. She sang, her voice the melody that had led us here, her eyes sad and knowing. We stood there, captivated, when suddenly the chamber began to shake. The woman's form flickered, her song turning into a wail of despair. "Leave," she cried, her voice a piercing command. "Leave before it's too late." We didn't need to be told twice. Driven by a newfound urgency, we ran, the chamber collapsing around us. The way out was miraculously clear, as though the maze had decided to release us from its clutches. We burst out of the drainage pipe, gasping for fresh air, the night sky a canvas of stars above us. The sewers lay silent, a cryptic reminder of the horrors that lurked within. We never spoke of what happened, not to each other, not to anyone. The camera, our only proof, was lost in the chaos, its footage forever buried in the rubble of the sewers. But the memory of that night haunted us. The whispers, the melody, the spectral woman, they were imprinted in our minds, a nightmare that refused to end. People say the sewers are just old tunnels, nothing more. But we know better. We know that beneath our town lies a mystery, a horror that whispers in the darkness, waiting for the next curious soul to venture into its depths. And sometimes, when the night is quiet, I can still hear the faint echo of that haunting melody, a reminder of the night we ventured into the unknown and barely made it back. Growing up in a small town, you get to know every nook and cranny, every hidden alley, and every crumbling facade. But there was one house that always drew my attention, the old Whitaker place on Carter Lane. It stood there, a silent, brooding relic of a time long past, its once proud structure now surrendered to the relentless march of decay. I, Jason, would ride my bike past that house every day, my curiosity piqued by its eerie, abandoned demeanor. The garden was an overgrown jungle, the windows were boarded up, and the paint peeled off like dead skin. It seemed like a house forgotten by time, a remnant of a story untold. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves began their fiery death dance, I noticed something odd, a pile of mail, yellowed and rain-soaked, stacked haphazardly at the front door. It was as if the world kept reaching out to this forsaken place, only to be ignored, its pleas left to rot at the doorstep. My heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement. Today, I decided, I would finally satisfy my curiosity. I would peek behind the veil of the Whitaker house and unveil its secrets. Leaving my bike by the gate, I crept towards the house, the silence around me oppressive, as if the very air was holding its breath. The front door, surprisingly, was unlocked. It creaked open with a groan, a sound that seemed like a warning. Inside, the house was a time capsule, a snapshot of a life long gone. Dust lay thick on every surface, and cobwebs adorned the corners like macabre decorations. The air was stale, heavy with a scent that I couldn't quite place, a blend of mildew and something else, something unsettling. I ventured further, my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. The living room was a tableau of decay, the furniture covered in sheets, the wallpaper peeling like dead skin. A grand piano sat in the corner, its keys yellowed and silent. It was then I heard it, a faint sound, coming from the upper floor. A sound that shouldn't be in a house long abandoned. My heart pounded in my chest, every instinct screaming at me to flee. But my feet moved of their own accord, drawn to the mystery that lay above. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step a symphony of groans and whispers from the old wood. The sound grew louder as I ascended, a soft, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched before me, doors lining either side. The thumping was louder now, more insistent. It was coming from the room at the end of the hall. I approached slowly, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. The door swung open, and I was assaulted by the smell, a putrid, rotting stench that made my eyes water and my stomach churn. The room was in disarray, furniture overturned, wallpaper torn. And there, in the center of the chaos, was the source of the sound, a large, old-fashioned clock, its pendulum swinging with an eerie regularity. But it was what lay beneath the clock that stopped my heart. A body, or what was left of it, lay sprawled on the floor. It was Mr. Whitaker, his flesh decayed, his eyes empty sockets. Around him were scattered pages, covered in frantic, scribbled writing, the words of a man driven mad by isolation and despair. I stumbled back, horror coursing through me. Mr. Whitaker, the owner of the house, had been dead for who knows how long, his passing unnoticed, his existence forgotten. As I turned to leave, a glint caught my eye. On the floor, near the body, lay a small, ornate key. Without thinking, I picked it up, its cold metal biting into my palm. That's when I heard the laughter. It was soft at first, a mere whisper, but it grew louder, more manic. It wasn't coming from the room, but from inside my head, echoing in my skull. The house began to warp around me, the walls closing in, the air growing thick and suffocating. The laughter was all-consuming now, a chorus of madness that threatened to drown me. I ran, the key still clutched in my hand, my only thought to escape this nightmare. Down the stairs, through the living room, out the front door, I burst into the open air, gasping for breath, the laughter still ringing in my ears. Back home, I locked myself in my room, the key on my bedside table a tangible reminder of the horror I had witnessed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't escape the laughter that seemed to follow me. Days passed, and the laughter slowly faded, but the terror remained, a constant shadow at the edge of my mind. I tried to forget, to move on, but the key was always there, a silent, accusing presence. I knew I had to go back, had to uncover the full truth of the Whitaker house. Returning to the house felt like stepping into a nightmare. The laughter greeted me like an old friend, its manic tones a twisted welcome. I explored the house again, the key guiding me. It led me to a hidden room, a small study filled with Mr. Whitaker's possessions. His diaries lay scattered on the desk, his final entries a descent into madness. He wrote of a presence in the house, an entity that whispered to him, that showed him things no mortal was meant to see. He wrote of his growing obsession with the clock, how its ticking became his only companion in the loneliness that consumed him. And then, the final entry, a confession of a plan to end his torment, to silence the laughter once and for all. I left the house that day, the key still in my possession. I knew I couldn't destroy it, couldn't risk unleashing whatever darkness Mr. Whitaker had encountered. The Whitaker house stands still, a brooding monument to a tragedy forgotten. And I, forever changed by its secrets, carry the burden of the truth. The laughter never truly left me. It's a quiet echo now, a reminder of the day I peered into the abyss and the abyss peered back. The night at La Lune Bluey was like any other, suffused with the clink of glasses and the murmur of the affluent, seeking solace in gourmet food and vintage wine. I, Elise, was a mere shadow among the opulence, a waitress adrift in the sea of wealth and privilege. The job paid the bills, but barely. Each shift was a dance of polite smiles and practiced cordiality, a performance that ended the moment I stepped out into the cold, uncaring night. That evening, as I weaved through tables with practiced ease, my attention was drawn to a man seated alone in the corner. He was older, with an air of authority that money bestows. His eyes followed me each time I passed, a predator's gaze that sent shivers down my spine. As the night wore on, he summoned me over. "You're quite lovely, Elise," he said, my name rolling off his tongue like he'd known me for years. "How would you like to make some extra cash? Just a simple dinner at my place. Nothing you wouldn't do here, serving wine, smiling. Easy money." His proposition was a golden ticket, a way out of my financial rut. The sum he offered was more than I made in a month. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. I arrived at his mansion nestled on the outskirts of town, a sprawling testament to his wealth. The place was a fortress, secluded and intimidating. He greeted me with a glass of wine and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dinner was a blur of expensive china and forced conversation. He talked about his travels, his business, his late wife, and how lonely the mansion felt. His words were coated with a veneer of charm, but beneath it, something felt off. As the evening progressed, his demeanor changed. The polite facade slipped, revealing a more sinister nature. He began to reminisce about his younger days, his escapades, his conquests. His stories grew darker, the air around us heavier. I excused myself, claiming a headache, but as I turned to leave, he blocked my path. "The night is still young, Elise. You haven't earned your keep yet." Panic set in. I demanded to leave, but he only laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You think you can just walk away? You're in my world now, and here, I make the rules." I tried to push past him, but he was surprisingly strong. He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "You're not going anywhere." The opulent dining room felt like a cage, the walls closing in. I realized then the depth of my mistake, the danger I was in. This was no mere eccentric rich man, this was a predator, and I was his chosen prey. I struggled, my survival instincts kicking in. In the scuffle, a vase crashed to the floor, its shattering a brief distraction. I seized the moment, wrenching free and bolting towards the door. The mansion was a labyrinth of corridors and locked doors. My heart pounded in my ears as I navigated the maze, the man's footsteps echoing behind me. Each turn was a gamble, each choice a matter of life and death. Finally, I found a window. It was high, but it was open. I heard him closing in, his breath ragged with excitement. I had no choice. I climbed and jumped, the crowd rushing up to meet me. Pain exploded in my ankle as I landed, but adrenaline propelled me forward. I limped through the sprawling gardens, the mansion a looming specter in the night. Behind me, his enraged howls filled the air, a symphony of madness. He was no longer the composed businessman but a beast unleashed. I stumbled into the woods that bordered his property, the underbrush tearing at my skin. The sounds of civilization were gone, replaced by the whispering of the trees and the thumping of my heart. Time lost meaning as I ran, the forest a never-ending expanse of shadows and fear. My mind raced, images of what could have happened, what still might happen, playing in a loop. When the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, I found myself at the edge of a road, the forest's embrace finally releasing me. I collapsed, my body unable to carry me any further. A car found me, the driver's face etched with concern. He called for help, his words a distant echo in my ears. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, the nightmare I had escaped played over in my mind, a reminder of the thin line between safety and peril. They never caught him. His money and influence, it seemed, were shields against justice. But I survived. I bear the scars, both physical and mental, a testament to that night. I left the world of waitressing, the world of pleasing others for a paycheck. The experience had changed me, turned me into someone else, someone stronger, more cautious. Sometimes, late at night, I think of the mansion, of what might lurk behind the walls of the wealthy and powerful. And I wonder how many others there are like him, predators in suits and ties, hiding in plain sight. But I survived. I am a survivor. And though the shadows of that night will always linger, they will not define me. I am more than my fears, more than my scars. I am Elise, and I am still here.